This episode is powered by Bandzoogle, the easiest all-in-one website platform for pro musicians and bands. You know who controls all your social media followers? Of course you do. Social media companies control who sees what and when they see it. Two things that will help ensure you're in control of your music business and your fan-based community are a website and an email list. Bandzoogle can help you with both. Plus, a solid website makes you look legitimate. Serious musicians, singers, songwriters, composers, and performers know this to be true. If you don't yet have your own website, check out Bandzoogle. It was created by musicians for musicians. I use it and I love it. It's as easy to use gets, and you don't have to worry about updates for things like plugins and security patches. Bandzoogle takes care of that for you. The features and support are both incredible. See for yourself. Go to bandzoogle.com to start your 30-day free trial. Use the promo code Robonzo to get 15% off your first year. Plans start at just $8.29 a month. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code Robonzo, ROBONZO, to start your free trial today. Let's do the show. This is The Unstarving Musician. I'm your host, Robonzo. On this podcast, I have conversations with independent music artists and industry professionals intended to help indie artists be better at marketing, business, the creative process, and all the other things that empower us to do more of what we love: make music. Would you like to help other independent musicians find this podcast? Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast service. It really helps. The Unstarving Musician podcast is made possible through the generosity of listeners like you. One of the easiest ways to offer support is to join the Unstarving Musician community. Just go to unstarvingmusician.com and join right there on the homepage. As a member, you'll receive from me tips and lessons you can use in your music journey. And this isn't just coming from me and my years of experience as a gigging musician. It also comes from the wisdom of hundreds of other musicians I've talked to as part of the Unstarving Musician project and podcast. You'll also get a free copy of the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs ebook, and that's all free just for being part of the community. To learn more about other ways of offering your support for the podcast, please visit our sponsor page at unstarvingmusician.com/crowdsponsor. Welcome to another episode, my sweet jelly rolls. Interview days always make me feel good. My guests tend to lift my spirits. The other day, though, I realized I'm feeling a little crappy lately, a little down. I'm stressed about the pandemic, man. Not the quarantine so much, although that sucks too. I'm feeling social anxiety, like I've gotten weirdly comfortable in quarantine, as if I've been rehearsing for this moment my entire life. As in, I don't want to hang out with people, with my friends. That's messed up, I know. I just finished a book called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, and I'm getting back into another one called Buddhism Without Beliefs by Stephen Batchelor, and they helped me kind of think through this stuff, I guess. My guest Kate Schutt helped me through it a bit too. Now, her latest album is about the 5-year journey caring for her mom while she was dying of cancer, and although I explained to her that she and I have something in common, including our relationship with death and the loss of a parent to cancer, but yeah, so this is kind of a death episode. We also talked about self-hate. This doesn't sound like it was an uplifting episode, does it? It really was, though, I'm telling you. I was just telling my wife this morning that I think I should seek therapy, but in a big way, my convo with Kate was therapeutic. We do talk about music and songwriting. Kate wrote a book about songwriting called The Ultimate Guide to Songwriting. Not what I expected, but I think it's really good. She's gotten some great feedback. She was super fun to talk to. I had to use Zoom the day we spoke because the recording software I normally use crapped out on me last week. I think I got it working for an upcoming interview, so I'm all good now. But anyway, on Zoom, Kate had her camera on, and she was so darn charming. She seemed so comfortable on the camera. I wasn't wearing a shirt for the interview, which is why I did not turn my camera on. There was nothing behind that. I just wasn't wearing a shirt. But hey, she said she really liked my Zoom profile pic. See, she lifted me right there. I think we're going to do a part 2. That would be fun. Here is me and Kate Schutt. Are you by chance Canadian by birth, or you have some ties to Canada? Okay.
Yes, I have a lot of ties to Canada. Nope, I'm not Canadian by birth. I was born in the U.S., in Chadford, Pennsylvania, but in the around 2003 or 2004, depending how you want to count it, I moved up to Guelph, Ontario, Canada.
Why?
My partner was Canadian at the time. I mean, my partner at the time was Canadian, and she was ready to move back. She had been going to Harvard, and was ready to move home. And I had been living in Boston since graduating from Harvard and studying at Berkeley still in the summer times, and had been in Boston for a total of, I don't know, around 10 years. All of a sudden I was like, wait a second, I've been here for 10 years. What the heck? And it sort of coincided with her feeling like she wanted to move back to Canada, up to Canada. And she kept telling me how amazing the music scene was up there. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, great. So I went up to check it out for a weekend kind of before, before we made the big move. And indeed, she was right. It was amazing. The Canadian music scene, I don't think it's as hidden of a gem as it was then anymore because of Arcade Fire and Broken Social Scene and Leslie Feist and all these amazing Canadian bands and musicians that have now like kind of made it on the international scene. But then it was...
I have to stop you for just a sec. So I'm about 11 years older than you, and there were a lot of cool Canadians on the scene way back when. But
yes, I know.
You're right. But you're right. I mean, they have, in the pop scene in particular, they've really become prominent. And I guess, well, sort of just like music in general, one side effect of the whole digitalization of everything was that it brought a lot more musician faces to the internet and to our attention. Sadly, there's so many, and you kind of lose where can I find the really good ones? But anyway, go on.
No, yeah, I mean, I realize how naive that sounds when I say that. Of course, there's incredible Canadian musicians that we all know and love. Joni Mitchell. So I mean, it's absurd to say that, but anyway, I was blown away by the music scene up there, and specifically what captured me and just enamored me and endeared me to it right away was that I showed up there with a guitar in my hand, and everyone I met was like, "Oh, let's play music. Like, let's play." And I was coming from Boston, which is a wonderful city that I love, but it's a very academic town, and it's because of that, I think there's a lot of division between the genres of music being played there.
Yeah.
Like the jazzers play jazz with other jazzers. This certainly when I was there. It might be different now. It's a lot later now. But it felt very siloed. And when I got to Canada, it was like, oh, you have an instrument, you play? Great, let's play. That was my experience there. I made a record soon after being there with Dwayne Andrews and Patrick Boyle, and Dwayne is like an incredible gypsy jazz guitar player, and Pat is a great trumpet player, plays with Dwayne, but plays a whole host of other music as well. The producer for a couple of records I made up there was Michael Philip Voyevoda, who was like Bare Naked Ladies, but everybody has like tons of musical interests, and it's all enmeshed. It wasn't so siloed as what my experience had been in Boston. And so it just like felt so at home, because that's the kind of musician I am. I love all kinds of music. I try to know something about all kinds of music. I grew up playing the music I played when I was a kid was classic rock. Janis Joplin and the Grateful Dead and the Rolling Stones, and awesome music, and then fast forward to finding out but my guitar teacher when I was 11 years old was a major bopper. Like,
really?
Yeah. So I was in my lessons, I was learning all these crazy seventh chords and like playing Horace Silver songs, but then when I was playing on the weekends with my friends, it was Janis Joplin and the Rolling Stones. So, there was always this breadth of music in my life that I felt like I was able to sort of how Canada was when I got up there. And I just loved it. I loved the music scene. I love all the musicians. I love those relationships I built. I love the music. I miss it terribly.
Well, it sounds wonderful.
It is wonderful.
Funny
we should
enough,
all go up there and live up there and play music.
I would like to go there. I have a growing number of friends. My wife and I have a growing number of friends that are Canadian. We're in an expat community that draws a lot of Canadians as well. And funny enough, a guy I've been playing music with, one of them is Canadian. And so, yeah, I would like to at least visit Toronto, but but I'd like to see some of these other areas, So, nice. And are you currently in New York City?
This very moment?
Yeah.
This very moment, I'm not in New York City. I live in New York City and was there for the first 2 months of the quarantine. But my partner lives in San Diego, and she had a really serious shoulder injury, and I needed to come take care of her. So I did the amazing thing of deciding to get on a flight and come out here. But there was really no option. So
you'd been before, obviously, and since your partner lives there.
Yeah.
Are you enjoying being there with the idea of being there a little more long term, or?
Yeah, I mean, over the years since we met, I've spent long periods of time here, a month or more. I think actually the longest we've spent together is a month, but so this is sort of rivaling that now. And yeah, it's amazing. I mean, Southern California, like, it's incredible.
Yeah, it's a lovely area.
Yeah, like, does the weather get any better than San Diego? I really don't think it does.
I think only in Santa Barbara, but there are no other places.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's
because of
amazing.
its temperance. Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. Well, I know things are getting a little bit better in the New York City area, having spoken to someone from there just a couple of weeks ago, but how nice for you to be in San Diego right now. So
yeah.
Okay, so there's a theme here that was leads nicely into an area of discussion I wanted to get into, which is your latest album. And you mentioned needing to offer care to your partner. Obviously, from what I read, you provided much care for your mother for a few years, which ties in very strongly to your latest album. And I'm just curious to know, because you mentioned the ladder carrying gig. Is that something you've always been, as in, kind of caretaker by personality, or just that these just happen to be two instances, people that are near and dear to you, and hey, I'm going to take care of them?
That's a good question. I never thought about that. No, I think I really got much better at it when my mom got sick.
Sure.
And it wasn't a decision. I mean, I've talked about this, I've written about this, but it wasn't a decision. When my mom got diagnosed with cancer, it wasn't a quote decision. Like, I just knew I was moving home and taking care of her. I don't know how else to say it. Like, it was just, I mean, obviously it was a decision, but it didn't come to me as like, what are the pros and cons of this? Like, it was just like, we found out that she had a tumor in her stomach that she needed to get removed as soon as possible. And I was moving home, and so I think that process of taking care of her and being solely responsible for her care for 4.5 years, or basically, obviously at the time, we didn't know how long she would live, ended up being 4.5 years, changed me as a person. And now I'm much, much more attuned to that and have much more facility. And I truly think that I'm at this point in my life I'm doing the wrong thing. I should be in that I should be in the caregiving world more. I think that's a skill I have that I developed. That, or I don't know. I mean, music and medicine, so to speak, are quite similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah. They're therapeutic, to say the least. Music for as medicine. Well, I have in common with you, and it's funny that almost at the same time I was apprised of you and your music, I saw the story about your latest album, your mother, and then I guess I saw your TEDx talk, and I'm like, okay, I have a couple of things I just sort of caught me by surprise, although it shouldn't. It's just all too common, right? But I lost a parent to cancer, and
So
you thank you. You seem to have a relationship with death that is perhaps different than others. I feel like kind of have that, or may share some of that with you. And it was the passing of my father, or the time leading up to that did that for me. I did not take care of him, but I was amazed that his youngest, my half brother, and his then wife, who was a nurse, they did that, and it was really amazing. But yeah, so I am consequently, you may be interested to know this. I met a woman who's become a good friend that has an interesting relationship with death, to the extent that she's written a book that's pretty nice called Carpooling with Death.
I'd love to read it. I'm so interested in all the literature around death. I mean, it's been a major focus of my reading life since my mom got sick. So it's
imagine.
called Carpooling with Death.
Yeah, Margaret Maloney is the author, and but so yeah, she had sort of more than her fair share come at her at once, and she talks a lot about grieving, which I know that you've done a bit of speaking about as well. I haven't had an opportunity to see your TEDx talk yet. I'm looking forward
That's
to
fine.
So really looking forward to seeing it and hearing it. But I guess tell me about the music as it relates to life during this period as best you can.
Sure. I mean, what was happening in my life was that I had moved back from Canada in 2010 and had moved to New York, essentially, and was trying to establish myself as a New York musician. And that takes a little bit of time. So kind of by 2011, things were happening, and I was feeling more comfortable there, and that kind of thing. And then a friend of a friend of a friend basically sent me one of these things, like, hey, sort of like a cruise ship gig, like, hey, you should audition for this thing. And it happened to be, it wasn't on a cruise ship. It was at a restaurant in Doha, Qatar. And they were looking for like a female guitarist singer to do basically like a residency type gig. So I put together a little audition tape and sent it over. And that's sort of backstory. That I fast forward, I got that gig and I was ready to go. Like, I was learning all the music I needed to learn and literally had my bags packed.
Can you tell me where exactly this was? I'm not familiar with the place that you mentioned.
Doha, Qatar. It's a city in the Middle East, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to stop you again. Why would you go? I said this about Canada, and now I'm actually really asking for a completely different reason. Obviously, I thought about Canada. I said, after I said it the way I did, I thought, well, it is pretty cold there, so why would you? But what attracted you to this gig? In the area?
Well, it was an adventure. It was a way to play a lot of music. I mean, I think I had never been one of those musicians who did a cruise ship gig, which a lot of my peers and colleagues have had, or something similar, where you have a residency type gig where you're just forced to like learn a ton of music, play every night. I mean, in this day and age, it's really difficult to find a gig where you can play every night or play every week.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible.
Well, especially now recently.
Yeah, of course.
Although one could argue set up in your living room every night now. You're
Well, right. I mean, I've certainly been playing a live every week. I've been doing a live stream concert since COVID started. But anyway, it was an adventure, and it was something I'd always wanted to do, to challenge myself with that kind of a gig. And I mean, it just seemed like it was all expenses paid. I mean, they gave me an apartment. I mean, it was like I was going to go over there and do that for a month with the opportunity to stay a couple more months if I wanted to, and then probably, save up a lot of money and travel around. And
cool.
I had literally like signed the contract and, was ready to go. My bags were packed. My guitars were in their cases. And I went down to see my mom and dad and to say goodbye. And that's when my mom basically told me that she hadn't been feeling very well, and she had just gotten a CAT scan, and they were waiting for the results to sort of figure out what was going on. And I say that all because I had been really engaged in music. Like that was my life. And then we got the results that she had this tumor and she needed an immediate surgery, and and then frontline chemo, etc. And I chose to go home and do that caregiving, and I put music away. I mean, there was just no room in it in the day for me.
Does that mean that you actually made it to the gig to start doing it and then heard the news, or
No,
were you still in at New
no,
York?
I was gonna leave a few days later, so
Okay.
I got the news about my mom, and I basically told my dad to take me back to the train station. I got on a train to New York, came back up to New York, reached out to my contact in Qatar and said, I'm not coming. This is what happened. Sorry, and then I basically unpacked my bags, repacked them, and got on a train the next morning back to Pennsylvania. So, I'm saying all this to say, like, I literally, got back to my parents' house, and I put my guitar in its case in the corner of my childhood bedroom, and, and started figuring out what the next steps were for her. And I didn't pick it up for basically a year and a half.
Wow.
But all of that time, I was, obviously I was having these incredible experiences and life-changing experiences. And I knew, like, and they were so poignant and so meaningful to me, and so just about what makes us human, that I knew I wanted to write about them. But I didn't know whether I would ever be writing songs again or what the landscape would look like. So I just started taking notes, basically. And
What a great idea.
yeah, I just started like writing ideas down in a little notebook, and then about a year and a half into it, my mom got went into a big remission. The frontline care, her first round of chemo was successful, and she went into a remission. And during that time, I was so lucky to get a residency at an artist residency program called the UCross Foundation, and I went there for about 6 weeks of just time and space, basically, and started writing this music that makes up the new record. So I started writing it during that time period. Then I went home, and my mom, eventually came out of remission, and the caregiving was intense again, and didn't work on the music for a while. And it was just sort of went back and forth like that. Like I would get little breaks of time and go away for a week, or come up to my apartment in New York and just work for a week, or, get these sort of windows of opportunity to work on the music. Until really her last year, when she was, it was pretty clear that chemo was no longer effective, and we chose to go into hospice really early so that she could have the best quality of life. And then I obviously wasn't working on any of it, but my mom heard a lot of the songs. Heard about 7 or 8 of the songs that I ended up, out of the 17 or 18 that I ended up writing for this particular record. And
That's so great that she heard them.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was incredible. And so then she died, and obviously that was just a whole other thing. And I stayed around home to help my dad kind of get used to the new normal. And, um, and then I went back to New York, and that's when I started sort of really seriously being like, okay, this is a thing. Now it's time to write all the rest of the songs, because obviously there was a whole new reality for me of things I wanted to write about now that she was gone. Of stories I wanted to tell that from her perspective, that I couldn't write when she was still in her own shoes.
Sure.
Yeah.
And how long has it been since she passed?
She died in October of 2015.
Okay. And how old was she when she was diagnosed?
She was young, like 62, I think, or I can't really remember. She was young. I mean, she was healthy. She was young and healthy. It was, we would have had a lot of time together. All of us, my brothers and I, and my dad. So.
Yeah. How many siblings are you?
I'm the youngest of three. I have two older brothers that are about 3 years apart. All of us are about 3 years apart.
What are your thoughts, having thought about I don't know if I was going to say your mortality. That's what I thought a lot about when my father was going through his thing. But having put a lot of thought into your mom's passing and obviously your own life, how or what thoughts do you have surrounding the loss of family and friends in this very strange time that we've been in for the past months, where one of the things that's probably the most abnormal is how we're many of us are having to deal with the loss of someone close to us during this time.
I have so many thoughts about this time period that, like we all do. And it's so, there's so many things to say and so many things to say that I don't know how to articulate, so many feelings. Being a New Yorker now, and being there, and the feeling of that much death and that much grief, and in a way unacknowledged or unacted out grief. In the way that I don't know how to put it. I'm searching for a different word, but there's a way in which we're in this time and we can't fully grieve. You see pictures or you hear stories of people who had a friend or a family member die of COVID or not COVID.
Right.
And they can't have the kinds of gatherings that we need as a species. A Zoom Shiva, what is that? What's that like? My partner's been to a few of those. I have not, but many friends of mine were students and good friends with Ellis Marsalis, and he died early on in COVID. And I reached out to them right away and just said, I'm so sorry. It must be so hard, because I'm sure if this was not COVID, you guys would be on a plane immediately and be taking part in what would be a citywide celebration,
right,
of an incredible musician who's influenced countless musicians. And I know it's just so weird for them, and obviously for the family. It's just, there's so much. I just don't know how this is going to play out in terms of the amount of grief that is out there, and that I don't think it's not like it's not acknowledged, but it's like not being expressed.
Yeah, I'm just, starting to hear people talk about it a little bit, and someone who's in the, kind of podcasting musician circle that I'm in, I didn't realize, but she lost a family member close to her, and she just was trying to talk very publicly about how weird it is right now for everyone who's had this happen, and share her experience and hopefully help some others out. And I just, I've lost a couple of friends to non-COVID related things. One of them, uh, somewhat suddenly, right at the outset of quarantine, and another one who had a long, bout with cancer herself. And for me, it was just like, well, okay, obviously things from my perspective are a little different, but the closer you get into the immediate family and thinking how they feel, the spouses and so, children and all that, and it's just, I'm trying to wrap my head around that. And I I often say this to myself, but my parents were older than yours, and have both since passed. But I was think to myself fairly often, I'm glad my parents aren't here to see all of this.
Oh, I've definitely had that thought. I've had that thought about a lot of things,
Sure, as have I admit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the current political climate is quite challenging, and I'm quite happy that my mom is not having to live through it.
Yeah,
It's so, it's so disheartening.
I know. I like to refer to it as socio-political or social climate, because I feel that we've all become so responsible for a kind of degradation of something that was very basic to all of us, and that was being able to, have discourse
Yeah.
oh yeah, we could have a whole couple of conversations about that, right?
We could have many podcast conversations about that, but we will not. But
Yes.
I think that this moment of grief. I mean, it's also just a staggering number. I think there's a way in which the number of people that have died in the United States is just it's mind-boggling.
Yes.
And it's very easy to not, because it's such a big number. I mean, I find myself doing this. I'm not saying I'm not doing this. Like, it's such a big number. It's like, how do I want to put my hands around that number. I want to feel that number in a way that actually changes me, because it's a culture changing number. And yet there's ways in which we're operating as if it's not.
Yeah, I know. They're unfortunately often seen, or most, I guess, from every individual's perspective, are just numbers, and we forget the people behind the numbers. And yeah, I'm sure that has some perverse meaning to the loss of people that we do actually know, when you start going into the immediate family and then going out and out and out to the other relationships, and just sort of trying to wrap your head around all of that.
I mean, I also think that usually, I mean, I don't know. I'm only 45 years old, so I don't know. But I feel as though there should be some element of sacrifice from the rest of the country around, like they're like, we're in this unprecedented time, but it doesn't feel like I'm having to sacrifice much.
Sure.
And maybe that's because I'm lucky. And
Yeah.
I mean, I know I'm incredibly lucky, obviously. Like, that's a blanket statement. I know how privileged I am. But what I'm saying is, maybe I'm lucky that nobody in my inner circle has died from COVID or has died during this time period. But I guess what I'm trying to speak to is this larger sense of like, wow, we're going through something really unprecedented, and I don't feel like, I mean, I'm eating just as well as I ate before. I'm other than toilet paper, like, I haven't been worried about, like I feel like there's some element of this that I'm missing in a strange way. And I'm trying not to. I'm not purposefully not looking at the headlines, and I'm doing the imaginative exercise of imagining 100,000 deaths, and certainly seeing in New York City, what that reality was like. I don't know. I just don't know how to explain this sort of vertigo of like the number of deaths and the unemployment and the every way that the carnage, and yet my actual like day-to-day experience.
So what is the transition a bit? What is the segue of your music now? And do you have a clear, any sort of clear sense of what it will be in the coming couple of months, 6 months, coming year?
I don't. I just know that I have this album of music that's all about death, and it's not a downer. I mean, it's not, totally melancholy. I mean, I was very cognizant that if I wanted to talk about this subject in all the honest ways I wanted to talk about it, that it had to present the whole range of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I know that I have this music that can be helpful. So I think for me, it's just trying to find ways. I mean, the record's actually not released yet. I mean, there's songs of it around on my website.
I'm so happy to hear that, because I get frustrated sometimes, only on Spotify, but I did look elsewhere, like on iTunes, and I'm like, okay, I know it's here somewhere.
No, it's not anywhere. It's on my hard drive is where it is.
But some of it's on your website, yeah?
No, yeah, you can hear some of it on the website, and I've been playing a bunch of songs that aren't anywhere live on my weekly concerts. So, but the point is, I know I have this music that allows. I mean, one of the reasons why I wrote the music is because my experience during my mom's illness and afterwards was that so many people have a hard time talking about death and dying. And it's not like they don't want to. They want to. They feel that urge, but they lack the language.
Yeah.
And they lack the key, let's say. And it's not even it just is they need to open the door. And one of the ways that music works for us all, I think, is that it acts as that key. And so I wanted to write songs that basically people could use as a key, right? So if you didn't know how to say to your friend, I'm so sorry that you lost your father to cancer. Like, if you just didn't know how to do that, like you wanted to do that, you knew you should do that, you felt moved to do that, but you just couldn't get those words out. You could use the song as an intro, as a way to open that little tiny crack in the door. By either saying, like, I heard this song and it made me think of you and your dad, and whatever, however that functions, like it can stand in as that script, like a little script.
Yeah. I think that it has a lot of potential to be a rare gift because of the timing of your, preparing to or being in the process of releasing it. And even though it had everything to do with your mom and your relationship and who she is, the whole the whole theme of it, underlying theme of it is I think something that could be quite therapeutic for many. And boy, I think that a lot of this type of conversation is going to come gushing out in the weeks ahead. It just, like I said, I'm just kind of barely starting to notice it. Not that I'm acutely aware of everything that's happening around me, but all right,
I hope so. I mean, my hope is that I think all of our hopes are that this experience we're all living through really is a kind of reckoning.
Yeah. I'm going to switch gears on you again dramatically here, maybe, but I read that you got a concert program that seemed to have a lifelong impact on you, probably the concert, but that little memento from the concert. And I also read that you acquired it in Lexington, Kentucky. So I did want to know about your ties to Lexington. And by the way, I was just there last year for the first time in my life, which consequently too is where I referenced the loss of a friend at the outset of
Mm,
this whole COVID thing.
mhm,
He was from from Lexington. Wait, do I
mm.
have that right? He's from Kentucky. Yeah, Lexington, I believe. Anyway, we got to meet there. Yeah, tell me about your ties to Lexington, and then maybe a little about the what I assume to be kind of a lifelong impact of that concert.
Yeah. Well, Lexington, Kentucky, the only ties I have to it are that this is where I went to this life-changing concert. I had an aunt who, like my cool aunt, all of us have, if we're lucky, have some sort of cool aunt or uncle that's very, leaves an indelible mark on us. And I had a very cool aunt, my mom's sister, who at the time was living in a really rural town in Kentucky called Sulphur Well, Kentucky. And I was 10, 11 years old, something like that. And it was the Turners had just released the Private Dancer record.
Mm-hmm.
And I was obsessed with it, obsessed with it. I just loved everything about it. I basically wore that tape, that cassette tape out on my Smurf Walkman. And, um, Tina was going on tour and she called up my mom and said, hey, Tina's going to be in Lexington, at whatever big arena it is there. And can Kate come down and can I take her to the concert? And luckily for me, my mom said yes. So there I was eventually. And we drove an hour and a half or whatever it was to Lexington. And I was so excited and nervous for the concert that I threw up all over the inside of the car.
Oh no, that's hilarious. I hate throwing up, by the way.
I know, me too. But I was just too excited and nervous.
You are an emotional one.
Yeah. And so we had to stop at like some, rural gas station, and she basically like made me get out of the car and hold up the mats from the car, and she hosed me off, and she hosed out the inside of her Subaru and bought me a t-shirt, like a giant oversized t-shirt that said I heart Kentucky, I heart KY, and put me in that. Took my clothes off because I was, covered in puke, and put me in that and put on my shoes, hosed off my shoes, and on we went, and we made it. And yeah, it was an incredible experience. We had nosebleed seats, and but I got a program from it, and I just loved it. And Tina Turner's she's just my hero and my biggest musical influence, and I just love her. And I've seen her on tour pretty much every time she's been out since then.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So it was a quite a formative experience for me, and I'm just so lucky that I had an aunt who thought that up and decided to do it, and a mom who said yes.
Was that your first exposure to Tina Turner, or like your first real one? I mean,
my first concert, yeah. I think I don't know, somewhere in there, my dad and mom took us, my brothers and I, to see Michael Jackson at the Vet in Philly, like the open air stadium that no longer exists, with his brothers. So we saw that concert, and Cyndi Lauper opened up for him.
Wow,
and
that would have been fun.
That was amazing. I can still see the light show from in my mind's eye from the the brothers being on stage. And then somewhere in there, we also saw, is that it? That might be it. My parents also took us to see Crosby, Stills, Nash at the Mann Theater, I think it is, in Philadelphia, another outdoor theater, a little smaller. Those are some early concerts I remember going to. And of course, I'm old enough, and my brothers were older than me, so they were into the Dead. So I saw the Grateful Dead a couple times. The whole experience, the whole hanging out in the parking lot for hours beforehand, and that kind of thing, which is awesome. I have clear memories of all of that too. So
too funny.
Yeah.
So I read that, and I was thinking, oh, I know that feeling, when you have those old programs and they're kind of like you get lost in them, sort of like some of the older the LP, covers
totally
used to have that were, had any kind of serious content.
So great. Yeah, it's so great. Now when I look at that program, like, man, geez, she worked her ass off that year. Like, you know, the amount of gigs she did, the amount of shows she did, and those are huge stadium shows, you know. It's just like, holy smokes. Incredible.
Tell me about a little bit about the ultimate guide to songwriting when you wrote it, and is it still something that I don't know, is of active interest in the background of all the things that you do?
Yeah, well, I finished it. I started writing it a couple of years ago, and really, I didn't mean to write a public document, a book. I wrote it because I just got tired of having. I always had a like panic attack basically every time I went to start a new song.
No kidding.
Yeah, like a mini one, not a full blown panic attack, but like I just could never remember that I knew how to write a song. It's absurd to say, but we all have our own absurdities and our own hangups and our own obstacles, and that was one of mine. I mean, I would sit down to write a song and, you know, fully all the songs I was writing for my mom. Like, I know this is what I want to write about. I know, you know, and I just don't know if I can do it. And I was tired of that feeling. And so after I'd finished recording the album for my mom, which is called Bright Nowhere, sort of in the aftermath of that, I was like, you know, I don't want to feel this way again. Like, I can figure this out. So I decided to write myself a checklist. It's like, basically, so you didn't have to think. Like, all you had to do was follow the checklist and you would start a new song. Because it wasn't like finishing a song that was necessarily my problem. It was just getting over that initial push.
Is there a high level to the checklist that you can recite, or is it pretty massive?
Well, I mean, it's just very practical. It's like,
Let's hear it.
okay, sit down and, you know, like, well, first of all, find out when are you going to write. So don't leave it up to chance. Like, block it out in your calendar. You know, so you're going to songwrite at this time. So block out your songwriting time, even if it's 10 minutes or 5 minutes in your calendar. And when that time approaches, before it happens, arrange your environment. Like, have my particular tools around. So I like to write. I write by hand on blank pieces of copy paper. So have all that stuff around. Don't be looking for that when the time starts. So here's the checklist. You know, have a stack of blank paper. I use pencils. Have your pencils there. You know, have a glass of water. Have a kitchen timer ready. Like, have it all ready to go. And there. Okay, check all that off the box. You know, turn on the timer. Set the timer for 10 minutes. Turn on the timer. Do a free write on the topic for 10 minutes. If you don't have a topic, step back and look at your list of titles or ideas. Pick one, any one. Don't dither, you know. Then start the timer. Free write for 10 minutes. When the timer goes off, you know, depending on what's next, how much time you have left, you know, it was literally that basic. And I did this to like I said, to make sure that so that becomes just an action, right? It doesn't become about like my worth as a songwriter. It's just an action. It's just like a mechanic. Like, oh, this is how you fix that engine. You use this wrench, you blah, blah, blah. It's like that. And if you do that and you apply your ass to the chair and follow these steps, something will come out that then is usable to then create a song. Whether it's good or not remains to be seen. But that horrible feeling of, I don't know how to write a song, I'll never write a good song again. This sucks. I hate myself and my life. I mean, it was a lot of self-hate. So I was doing counter my self-hate. Because I had over the years tried so many ways of writing and adopted so many systems and adopted so many you know, methods and abandoned them and had gone weeks, months, half a year in between not writing because I took the abandonment and my inability to follow through on those methods as saying something about me personally. And that I wasn't a good songwriter versus it's just the method. Like, it didn't work. Figure out a new one. Don't take it personally.
Yeah.
So that's where that impulse came from. And I didn't want to feel that way anymore. And so I made the checklist, and I got to the end of it and started using it and was like, wow, this actually helps. And I shared parts of it with some friends who are songwriters, and their feedback was like, this really freaking helps me focus. Like, it helps me get into the zone.
That's nice.
And so, and so then I was like, well, if I could save even one other person the amount of self-hate that I have had over writing songs, then I should.
I have written the first song I have ever attempted to write in like over 20 years recently.
Wow. Amazing.
I'd kind of taken...
How'd you do it? How'd you break the spell?
Well, I never thought of myself as a songwriter, and I spent a lot of years focusing on playing drums and then singing and performing live. Mm-hmm. And then the podcast came along, and I started talking to lots of people like yourself, mm-hmm. and through meeting various other people in the last couple of years, I just got inspired to pick the guitar back up. And when I did that, the moment I did it, I thought I'm gonna start writing music, because I think the thought of writing music had been in the back of my mind for a number of years. And I thought, it's kind of like, well, what are you going to do? Because you're not going to write a piece of music on the drum set, right? So for me, that meant,
But with lyrics, you're probably not, maybe.
Well, and it was going to get to, I take for granted the something you mentioned, which is getting your tools ready, setting up your environment. Mm-hmm. So the lyrics for the song, the melody for the song came just sitting in a room that's very uninspiring, but my drum set happens to be in here, and a couple of Rolling Stones posters that are framed. Those are inspiring, but otherwise pretty uninspiring. I shouldn't say that. God, if you could see the view out the window, you'd probably
yeah, Panama.
Yeah, but anyway, so I'm sitting on the bed of this guest room that doubles as my practice space, and I hammer that out. But another part of that was I'd been attending this writers retreat kind of workshop periodically here locally at this place called Tranquilo Retreat. And it is very tranquilo there. And the woman who leads the workshop is, I really love her. She's just, I don't know, when first time I met her, there was I don't know, she's like someone from my past or something. I don't know, or like a school teacher. I don't know. I'm not sure, but she's really fun, very knowledgeable. And so we would do kind of like what you were describing, and she'd give us a writing prompt, and we'd write for some number of minutes, and then the small group would share just some feedback, and observations about the works. So anyway, as I started writing, I focused on writing, capturing a melody on the guitar first, knowing in the back of my mind I had several pieces of prose that I hadn't really spent a lot of time on yet. I was going to go find one of them, which I did.
Nice. Love
yeah, and so that has come together, and then there's been a lot of other stuff, of course. Some weeks later, I'm buying recording gear so I can play the drum.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
So, but anyway, yeah, so it's very interesting to me the way that you described it, and it was absolutely not what I expected. I'm glad that I'm weirdly glad that you brought in the self-hate thing. I was going to ask you about it, but I think you just sort of told me, gave me a glimpse into where that, where some of that comes from.
Oh man!
Because I happened to see you had something recently on Facebook, just kind of trying to help others who might go through that. And believe me, I talk to my wife about it. I call it the voices, and just the voices in my head, and the madness that is inside between my ears. But anyway, I guess everyone goes through that. That's cool. Well,
I think everyone does. It depends on how tuned in. I mean, it's tuned in you are to it, and I think some people go through a lot of their life not knowing that there's a voice or voices talking to them and telling them, narrating their experience.
Yeah.
And then I think once you sort of eavesdrop and you get that awareness, you get that little bit of distance, and that you can start to see them for what they are, which is, not you, basically, is my viewpoint. They're not me. This is a program. This is a thing that the brain does that is not me.
Songwriters who hate themselves.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's real, and it's basically the thing I'm talking about the most right now, because exactly what you said is happening. The more I talk about it, and the more I really share the amount of self-hate I have around songwriting and playing music. I mean, yeah, I mean, we could talk forever about this.
Well, it certainly must be part of why you're so good. You're this tortured soul.
Yeah, but did I have to suffer as much as I suffered? It's just like, I'm a very slow songwriter. I'm a very, very slow songwriter, and that in itself has been, a torturous, something that the voices have tortured me about. I played guitar kind of very casually as a hobby all my life, until one day. I mean, I always had lessons, yes, but I never practiced. I was in a garage band. I was in like a couple bands in high school, like I wasn't practicing. I wasn't, it wasn't until I sort of realized, like, oh wait, I want to do this thing for real. Like, I want to give it a real shot. And that I then decided to drop out of Harvard and go to Berkeley, and that, the self-hate that came from that experience.
Oh my goodness.
Of going to a music school as basically a hobbyist musician. Like, whoa, that's some intense shit that, I'm still getting over.
That's so funny. I have to tell you something that just yesterday I was looking at, I was trying to figure out if a guy I was acquainted with was still associated with this online drum lesson school by a guy named Mike Johnston out of Central California. It was a really great community, really great site. But I was looking at the drum camps he's done, which I've always kind of fantasized at going to. And I'm not a slacker drummer or anything. I'm about to say something that sounds kind of self-deprecating, but I always tell people, look, technically I'm like an intermediate drummer at best, and you can break me down as a beginner in so many areas. But that's sort of like how instruments are, right? There are just so many styles and techniques, to dive into. But I'm looking over the requirements of basically for the first time I learned, you audition for these intermediate, and I certainly wouldn't even think of going to an advanced one, but I thought I could probably get into an intermediate one. And I'm like, what? I got to send in a little video audition of these things. And therein went the self-hate for me, I guess. I was like,
cue the self-hate reel.
So tell me, yeah. So,
did I tell you?
Tell me more. No, tell me more about how it manifested at Berkeley.
Oh, I mean, when I say I sucked comparatively to everyone else, you must believe me. Like, I am not exaggerating. I mean, I was surrounded, obviously, by people who had been playing their instruments seriously all their lives.
And some of those being the people that were coming in like you? Some of them?
Yeah, I mean, people who were like, I mean, this is where they wanted to go. Like, this is what their lives were. They were instrumentalists. They wanted to go to Berkeley, and they wanted to be musicians at that level. They were there going to college for that, and I show up, like wanting to do this, but never really studying. I mean, that's a little tongue in cheek. Obviously, like I said, I always took lessons. I always was playing some way, but I wasn't trying to become, Jim Hall on the guitar. Like, I didn't even know who Jim Hall was.
So you had to compare. You had to compare yourself then, obviously, as soon as you got there, and saw how.
I mean, I didn't have to. I was immediately just crushed by the amount of knowledge that I was supposed to know. Like, you don't show up there and not know a certain amount of stuff. And I showed up there and didn't know a certain amount of stuff because Berkeley was the only music school without an audition.
What about North Texas, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Are they
Now I do.
Are they also? Are they also?
I don't know. I wasn't
that
looking
way?
at schools outside of Boston and New York when I
Sure.
had this crazy idea, because I knew I wanted to go back to Harvard and finish my English degree and finish playing sports if I could. So I didn't look any further. Anyway, the point is, I got there and I was up Schitt's Creek, totally. Like I was screwed, and so thus ensued like a mad attempt to quote catch up, where I basically took a kitchen timer, and I would be the first person in the practice rooms in the morning and the last person to leave at night, which basically meant I got in there at 7 and I left at 2 a.m.
For God's sakes.
in addition to going to class during the day, right? So like I was sleeping. Consequently, I don't remember any of my time at Berkeley because I barely slept, but I was just making up for lost time. I mean, I just had to work my ass off. I mean, I didn't know what ear training was. Ear training? What the hell is ear training? What are you talking about? Like, like what? I mean, I barely knew how to sight read.
What years were you there?
I started in the summer of 1995.
Okay.
So I went summer, fall, spring. And then I think I took a summer off, and then I went fall, spring, summer. And then I went back to Harvard and finished. And then I went back, and then I kept going back to Berkeley in the summer times after that. Because you can take fewer classes in the summertime.
Has Berkeley, the School of Music, has it joined the ranks of putting, being one of these places where you're going to go into lifelong debt to graduate from there?
I don't know. No clue.
Oh, that's good. That's a positive sign, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, it's very different now.
Sure.
When I was there were only 2,000 students max. There was only about 10% of us were women. I was the only girl in the guitar department. Now Berkeley's a lot bigger. They have way more incredible facilities. I'm sure there's more than one girl in the guitar department. I mean, it was a very different place. It was a very different place. So I don't know what Berkeley's like. I haven't been back. I don't. I loved it. I mean, there's so many ways in which I wouldn't be talking to you today if I hadn't had that experience. But it was rough. It was really rough for me. And yeah, I was just confronted every minute of every day by how much I didn't know, and so long to just having a drive to be excellent, and that frisson is very difficult. It's hard, and it engendered a lot of self-hate.
Oh man. Oh my goodness.
Which I'm still, and I think there's a way in which systems engender a lot of self-hate. Like there was a lot of weird shit that went on at Berkeley for me in terms of things people said to me, and just the way that they do. Any system, if it gets codified enough, is against the individual. People don't fit into systems. There's I understand why we all know what systems exist in the world, but there's also reasons why they're soul crushing, and so I've been able now to look back at all of that, of course, and do all the inner work to let all that go, and to see like, that voice in my head, I know exactly I know who that voice came from. Like that kind of thing. So, I mean, we all have those experiences. I'm not a special snowflake in that regard,
Sure. Well, there is so much about you that we have not talked about today. So I'll go ahead and say it here on the recorded portion of our show that everyone who's listening should check out Kate Schutt. Did I say it right? Kate Schutt.
Yep. You got it.
And Schutt is actually SCHUTT.
Yes.
.com. And check her out on all the socials. yeah, there's a lot of stuff about you that I think is very interesting that people would like to know about. Not to mention your music. And thank you for spending time with me today.
Oh man, I loved it. I feel like we could solve a lot of the world's problems if we just kept talking for a while.
Well, you know what? If you don't hear it from me, you just let me know if you're ever interested in part 2, and we'll do
Oh
it
yeah,
sometime.
of course. I'm already interested in part 2. Also, I want part 2 to happen after you submit that drum video. And
Hey man, I didn't say anything about a video. But yeah. I will. I'm trying to chronicle a bit of the journey, as comical as it is, and
do it.
Yeah, I'll keep you up to date for sure.
Do it. I mean, it helps so many people. I mean, it's just that. I mean, that's why I include. I mean, I could easily just say, "Oh, I wrote a book about songwriting." Like, look at me, But the whole point is like, no, I didn't actually set out to write a book about songwriting. I set out to like deal with my self-hate, And it just so happened that I thought it might help you with your self-hate, and so I saw the rest of it through, And I think like that vulnerability and that willingness to be like, this is it. This is what it feels like, It's so it makes me more human.
Well, if I was allowed to do it, I think I'd probably let the outro music be different than it usually is when we play that song, "She's So Heavy" by the Beatles from Heavy Road.
Yeah, man. Thanks. I mean, it's just so great, and I love what you're doing with the podcast, and even just I love the word I love the phrase. I love the unstarving musician. It's such a great twist.
I got that from a friend who's kind of a casual drummer. We were doing one of those mastermind things in Silicon Valley, and he goes, "Hey, you should call it the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting." I'm like, "What? That's great."
So great.
Yeah. So great. All right, Kate. Well, you will hear from me soon, since we have
great
episode coming out soon. And thanks again for your time. Great talking with you.
It was wonderful. Yeah, you be well.
This episode was powered by ConvertKit. More than just an email marketing company, ConvertKit is focused on landing pages too, giving beginner creators everything they need to start building their email list. I've been a ConvertKit user since early 2016, and I love it. Their new free plan allows creators to make unlimited landing pages and forms. With ConvertKit, you can choose from multiple templates, add personalization and design, include an incentive email, create thank you pages, manage subscribers, and send broadcast emails. The support and educational resources offered by ConvertKit are top-notch too. That's important to me. It should be to you as well. To learn how ConvertKit can help you connect with your audience so that you can make a living doing the work you love, go to unstarvingmusician.com/convert or look for the link in the show notes for this episode. If you have feedback, questions, comments, suggestions about the podcast, my guests, me, please visit unstarvingmusician.com/feedback. You can leave me a quick voicemail right there on that page, right from your browser. All my other contact info is there too, and I'd love to hear from you. Find links for just about everything talked about in this episode at unstarvingmusician.com/podcast. Thank you for listening and sharing with your friends. Peace, gratitude, and a whole lot of love.